Good afternoon and welcome to Laura's Lens on. And this is episode 1. I'm your host, Alan Wozni, and I have in the studio, the Zoom studio, I've got Laura Lorette and Mel Caminati. Did I get that right, Mel?
Yep, that's correct.
Mel's joining us all the way from the Philippines, so it's quite late there, early in the morning. And Laura's in Toronto. I'm in Calgary. And so today, Laura, I want to let you and Mel introduce yourselves, and then we'll dive right in. So first of all, Laura, introduce yourself. This is Laura's Lens, so we need you to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Laura Lorette. I have my background is in technology. I was a developer for 13 years. I got certified in project management, and then I moved over and focused into the whole startup space 6 years ago, and that's my background.
Well, and we're going to go right into that. We'll deep dive into startups, because I think that's kind of your tech background leads into the startup world. But Mel, please introduce yourself, and then we'll dive right in.
Yep, just a quick introduction. My name is Mel Caminati. I've also been a developer for more than 10 years. And then I'm now focused more on project management. I do development on the side, but it's more of like a hobby. And now I'm doing project management on the hardboot side.
Perfect. Okay. Well, the reason we're here is because of Hardboot but the OPN world, or Open People Network, it funnels into a lot of the startups. So our first episode, we've chosen the world of startups. So Laura, I want to go right in to get Laura's lens and your view, and hopefully get a microscopic view and not the bird's eye view of your lens. If you play on words there. But Laura, how long have you been working with startups? Let's start there.
I started working with Jeffrey about 9 years ago, and on the Hardboot side, we really started working with tech startups to help them build their MVP by reducing
MVP being the minimal viable product.
Right. So it's really hard to get investment until you've got traction, and you can't get traction until you have your tech built. It's always chicken and egg. How do you build it when you have no money, right? So we helped a lot of tech startups initially build their MVP by reducing the cost, making an investment early on. So That's really how we started. And then 6 years ago, Jeffrey and I started OPN, which at the very beginning was really just this. It was podcasts, and it moved over to somebody saying to us, hey, we want to practice our pitch. And we were like, okay, let's have an event. So we were like, planned it. We had 68 people show up downtown Toronto, and we had a pitch event, and that was 113 events ago.
Wow. Okay, let's go back to episode 1, but 68 people show up on the street, or was it, how did they present? Was it a booth, a studio, or how was that? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was at 251 Queen Street West, and we continued to have our events there throughout the years until we grew too big, and then we had to move over to City Hall. We just reached out to our network, and everybody was super excited. We had 3 companies pitch their startup, and we had a panel made up of 3 advisors, very similar to, really no different than what we do today at a smaller level. And they just basically gave their feedback, right? So you need to change this, do this, and your investment ready or not, or you need to work on X, Y, and Z. And there wasn't really a forum at that time where they could just practice their pitch, and that's what they wanted. This is before the pandemic, when we didn't have all this availability, right? So everything's changed now.
The first few, whatever it was, those episodes, were they using slides? Did you have the tech? Tech's changed a little bit there, but was it just slide decks, or they were presenting, from whatever they had?
Yeah, it was PowerPoint, and they would present, and we put it up on the TV screen. We had TVs there, and everybody literally gathered around and tried to see. And as we grew, it's just got so big, and it didn't matter if it was minus 20 out, it was boiling because of the amount of people that were in there. So we ended up having to go to a bigger venue that would hold 300 people. So it changed a lot. And literally right before the pandemic, we had our investor event, and we were supposed to have our big City Hall event on Thursday, and it had to be canceled. And that was March,
2020. Yeah,
2019.
Oh, 19.
Yeah. That was the last time we had an event on site.
Oh, okay. So look, I mean, how many startups would you say have flowed through Open People Network over the years? And maybe Mel, you can check the CRM data just in case. But Laura, what would you say the ballpark?
Well, I
over the-
talk to 300 startups every month for sure, maybe more. I'm not sure. So, it's obviously changed over the years. We have a lot more flow today than we had initially. So, for sure over 10,000.
Wow. Mel, Mel's shaking
Yeah.
his head. Mel's shaking his head. Does the CRM? You've blown up the CRM, the database, haven't you?
That's a lot of data to process, but yeah, accurately based on Laura's taking up calls. That's really not enough data that we can capture everything. Since the start of OPN since 2016, I believe more than 10,000. It's gonna be on the record, but on the CRM, what we mostly capture are the most active startups.
Yeah.
And the startups that are currently being interviewed by Laura and probably near to investment. And
Sure.
I think we have at around near 4,000. All
Okay.
of
So
them.
it's extensive. So Laura, I wanted to, it's not a really a question you have to answer, but how many would you say of those startups, say 10,000-ish, how many have actually gone on and done something? What's the percentage of success-ish? If when I always hear numbers like a low percent. So what would you say?
Well, one, we have a lot of quality startups that come to us. So a lot of people come to us for deal flow now. We work with a lot of the startups. So we work with early stage startups. So some people will come to us with an idea and we'll work with them up to the spot where we feel like we're ready to invest. We didn't invest in one company for 2 years, and we talked to them every month prior to that. And then one day we were like, okay, you did this, now we're ready. So
Nice.
the percentage that get funded, I mean, we talk to so many startups, right? So the people, we run our investment program, and our goal really at our investment program is to only bring the companies in that we feel are 100% investable, and that we can find people or we want to invest in or into that event, so that 99% get a check.
Right.
And it allows syndication across. So one check from one group isn't going to be much if you can't get it all, because you won't have your run rate.
I was at a Platform Calgary event a few months back, and one of the guys said, he said to the startups like 97% fail, and then he said, but I work. He goes, and 3% kind of make it through. So obviously those are accelerated, real early stage companies.
Yeah.
But he said, and he's up in Edmonton. He said, I work with the 97%. He says, I want to see what it's kind of like after, the after story kind of, those ones didn't make it through. So he wants to work. That's an interesting philosophy, but let's go to the next question then, because you kind of filter, you're a filter. You filter through, and because you say, well, we want them to be successful. So that filter, if you're talking to 300 startups, you're really filtering out to allow them to get to the OPN platform. What is your key filter? What's your lens? How do you filter those startups?
Yeah, so for every startup, I have a 20-minute call, and in 20 minutes, I feel it's almost like speed dating. It's like, not that I've ever speed dated, but I feel like I'd be good at it just based off of all of this. So, you in 20 minutes, you really quickly have to get a sense for where they're at, right? So traction is obviously the thing that everybody's focused on. If you don't have traction, it's hard to have validated your business, right? So you've got to validate it. Market size is one thing. Of course, there has to be a market size, but you have to prove that they're going to use your service or your product, because if you're doing it, somebody else is obviously doing it too, right? Like there's always somebody there right behind you, and everybody has competition, right? So, a lot of it is just, most of it's traction. So, a lot of it's a feeling. Team is big.
Wait, that's your speed dating notice, isn't it? That's the timer for the speed dating.
Yeah, no, yeah, but it's so many things, right? When you talk to somebody, a lot of it's just a feeling. When you have that many conversations, you're looking for differentiation, right? Like, have I talked to a startup in this space, another 20 in the last month, and we're all doing the same thing, right? What's your competitive advantage over the other person that I just talked to who's doing the exact same thing? So uniqueness, And branding is huge in my mind, and that's just because that's my background, is branding, right? So on the development side.
So you kind of said that, you kind of, and I'm kind of jumping ahead, but I jumped to the filter thing. But I wanted to, what are the top 3 features you look for so that, and then you kind of said it, maybe it's a repeat and the bell's going again. So the speed, this is a speed dating, Laura. This is a speed dating round. But
Yeah.
so what are the 3 features you look for? The top 3 features. So this is sort of positive.
Well, one, I would say the team, their passion, and that they know their space and their competitors, right? So if they come to me and they are like, these are all my competitors, I'm like, no, they're not, right? Or these are my main, but they're all enterprise. A lot of these startups, their biggest competitors is other startups coming up in the same space.
Right.
So if they haven't recognized and haven't done their market research, I mean, that's a big flag right there, right? Obviously, market size and traction sort of go together. There has to be a market in order for there to be a business. And if you don't have any traction, it's really, you really haven't validated your business yet, right? So, and the other is team, right? So what makes you the right people to run this? Do you have the experience in this space? Have you been part of a startup before? Has anybody been? Have you run through an accelerator? What have you done as a team? Who have you brought on that makes you stronger? Are you a diverse team? If I had all of me in a company, there's no diversity and nobody is there to think of other things and brainstorm with, right?
So you mentioned, okay, I want to go back to your dating. You mentioned you've never used a dating app, but you did, but you did talk to a startup recently. You talked to Mel and I offline.
Yeah.
Okay, so because there's so many can you give an example? Not the company's name, but maybe just what would you tell a dating app startup?
It's competitive space, right? So how are you going to differentiate, and how are you going to get people to sign up for it? I think in the dating space app, it's a little bit different. I think when people decide to go on, they'll sign up for multiple ones, and then they'll decide which one they want to use. So it's really all about user experience. It always comes down to that. But it's a saturated market, and how do you? It's a tough market to get into right now because there's been so much success from other companies.
You mean dating is a tough one?
Yeah, period.
The dating world, but Bumble raised what, 10 billion? I mean, they had 10 billion market cap.
Yeah, there's always space in a market. We talked about this offline before, but Monday.com, when they came out, CRM is a saturated space. Saturated. It's been saturated for years. I mean, that's my history. I used to write CRM software before it was called CRM. And then, when Monday.com came out, there's thousands of CRM systems out there, and they came out with a bang. They raised money. They marketed the crap out of it, and they exited really quickly for a company that came into a saturated space that, that's difficult to do. So there is space in every market. You just have to be different, and you have to be louder, and you have to be better, but you have to also have a differentiation. Sure.
Well, Mel, do you have a CRM comment? Because I know you've got 4,000 in your database. Do you switch CRMs very often, or is it just you've gone with an old? Do you want to share your thoughts on CRM?
I have a couple of experience with the CRM before. I had an experience with the BPO, and we're using an open source a CRM software, and then a few months after we changed into something better, and then changed to another. So. But the most of the CRMs that I use, the ones that we are currently using now, is more flexible and very much, very much fit into the requirements that we need based on the data that we are gathering. So based on my experience with those CRM, again, I agree with Laura with what she said, that the CRM market's very saturated. Again, there's a lot of other softwares that are leading into market before, like you have Jira, you have Asana, you have Basecamp, you have other softwares that are open source that are also leading in the space market. But again, what Monday.com did was they have differentiated something in their features, and then they went into something that has been invented before, but presented it better. That the most of the tech space ride in. That's why I think what Monday.com has a big impact, because what they did for the existing CRM
Yeah.
is combine all those features and then present it better so that it will be useful for everyday use for the current emerging markets.
Well,
I
that
mean,
leads me.
branding,
Oh, go ahead,
branding.
Luke.
Well, I was just going to add branding and their marketing is really what got them where
Well,
they're
Phil
at.
Mickelson, Phil Mickelson, a major golfer, doesn't hurt to have him branding and wheeling up on the guy. But anyway, they do some pretty creativity. But I want to catch on that, Laura, and get your views now, because there's a difference between a pizza delivery app, kind of this point of Monday.com, or a better way to make pizza. So what do you say, given the sheer volume of startup ideas that do come across your desk or email or on a daily basis? How do you filter that? Like, so the better pizza delivery versus a better pizza, Laura?
So how do I filter through the startups?
Yeah. So the analogy of a startup that may come to you with a better idea of a better pizza delivery, or one that gives you the proverbial, like, so the 30 minutes are free, or if they come up with a better way or unique way of making a pizza. So you and I talked offline about that before, I guess, the tutor versus a tutor. Maybe that's the example. How's
Right.
a better tutor versus a going very narrow. So sorry if I long-winded question.
Yeah. I'm not really sure how to answer the question, to be honest, but with the vast amount of startups that I talk to, you literally have to filter them super quickly, right? So we talk to startups from idea all the way to Series A. Well, we talk to other startups too. I just talked to a startup raising a Series B, but we focus on the early stage startups, and you really just have to have a gut feeling when you talk to so many people around where they fit in, right?
Yeah.
So I literally have the best job ever. I don't even think of it as a job. I really get to foresee everything that's going on all over the world, from Africa to India to Israel, all over, and you really get to see what everybody's doing. Europe, and everybody's really different, and everybody's different in the way that they handle it. Like Israel they've got some really great innovative startups there that are mind-blowing, and then India is really doing an amazing job at trying to be the next China, per se, because of the rules that they've made. And Africa is really done an amazing job for a third world country to come into this space and come out with these fantastic startups. We saw some at the last E2E that, they were amazing. So, and they came out of an accelerator center in the States that we've partnered with, and they're solely working with companies in Africa and helping them grow and build. So, nice. Which is amazing. They need help, right? They don't have the same accelerators or technology that everybody else has. So.
Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting dilemma, because if they don't have the tech stack, they're probably going more kind of just traditional thing. Is it that the case? So they're just going real traditional in their approach, back to your early days?
Yeah, well, I think that they have the ability for development on a tech stack side, but they just don't have the infrastructure per se there that we have, or the same support, right? They don't have all of this startup support, grants, accelerators that we have in North America.
But I guess if you take if they don't have I had a discussion with the people on that, but about some of the problems, the dilemmas they have is electricity, for example, where they don't have the infrastructure to buy the hardware to support. The tech stack might be available to them, but they can't necessarily use it because they don't have the bandwidth, or the 5G isn't there, or in the community they're still using old technology. I mean, that's probably a dilemma. I don't know if you've seen that yet. Maybe it's too early to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. I was just talking to a startup yesterday, and they were saying that they started with their app was native instead of doing it web-based first. And they are in a space where you go to a store, and in order to use the rewards and all that, you have to download the app. So what they were finding was that they aren't in North America, is that the internet speed was too slow, and there was certain spots that even had 3G, so it would take 20 minutes to download, so it was useless. Right. So they had to actually go backwards, and then put their app on web first, which makes sense because now you don't have to have that download of the application when you're in the place of purchase, right? You can just
Right.
now the QR code again, the QR codes made this crazy comeback. QR code, it brings up the web page, you just enter it in and you're done. But they went, they learned that the hard way by spending all that money on creating a native app, and then figured out, hey, this doesn't work because of the internet infrastructure
Wow.
in those countries. That would work in North America, really wouldn't be an issue because we have so much data here compared to other parts of the world. But
Right.
in other parts of the world, you can't assume that that is going to be the case, right? So
Okay. Well, I mean, so that itself brings a different, interesting. So we could focus on that because the infrastructure is not there. The sort of technical side, not technical, the hardware side doesn't support that. So they've gone old school. That's almost old school to go down to QR codes.
it's the best. It's the smartest thing to do when you're creating your MVP, unless you have to be native because of whatever reason you need to. Like that's really the only way to use it. The best way to start your MVP is always on web because it's cheaper, and no matter what you release, the market's going to dictate change, and that happens all the time. You're never going to think of everything, and you're going to be faster to iterate, and you're going to get your MVP finalized a lot sooner if you keep it small and simple. If you make it too big, it's just going to take forever, right? And you spend more money and you learn the hard way, which is what they did. So
let's on that side. So let's maybe go sort of more North American-y, which is most of the startups you face. What are the missing elements, the top 3 or 2 or 3 missing elements you see in some of the startups you meet that you talk to?
Yeah, for sure. So not knowing their numbers. You got to know your numbers. You got to know what your revenue is. You got to know what your users are. You need to know your traction. A lot of the time I find people are, they didn't do their research before enough, right? So they don't know, like we talked about before, your competitors. Who are those people? And have you really looked at everybody, or have you just looked at the big players? Because the small players are even bigger competitors than the big players. The big players probably would acquire you, right? So look at everybody when you're doing it. And then, I think the pandemic was brought in this, can you adapt to change, right? I think that's one of the biggest things right now is how adaptable are you? Are you in a spot? Nobody would have thought the whole world would shut down completely, and we still haven't got back to, what I think we're getting to a new normal, but I still think it's getting there. And I really don't think that we've come close to seeing what's going to happen with this. And what happens with this is it only brings opportunity, and you can create solutions to all of the problems that have been created by this. So there's so much to come out of this, right? So mistiming is a big one, right? So like if you're within this, if you created a travel app and you released it back in March of when the pandemic started, that would not be a good idea, right? But if you were to release it today and everything's starting to open up, everybody's like, I gotta go travel. I haven't traveled for 2 years. So now is a way better time, right? So
I mean, those are valuable lessons. And in fact, if you think the lack of research, I don't think it matters where you are. And people don't, maybe they can't get the African or Indian, wherever they are, they may not have access to that, but that gets, but I think the internet allows that no matter what level they download, the research is there. So I think that's a valuable.
It's an ongoing thing too, right? Like you can't do your research in the beginning and stop and not do it again, because people are constantly coming up behind you that are doing the same thing as you or close to you. And you always have to be researching who are your competitors. You should always know this and know the numbers. So
do you find some of I say Y Combinator, one thing I hear from Y Combinator that the train of thought is, you've mentioned MVP, they talk getting to MVP as quickly as possible, but the other one is that personal pain point. Do you have any examples of where someone you recently said that they've come to you and said, we're doing this, and then it actually solved a personal pain point? Or have you seen that as an example?
Yeah, those are some of the best founders are the ones that have created their company based off of that. I was talking to somebody this week, and she went on a trip to Africa, and she realized that there was a problem in I want to not give her stuff away
Sure, no, I
particularly,
understand.
but she understood the problem in factories and how factories weren't running properly in other countries like in India and Africa. And, people were trying to fix that. Like how she told a story about a lady that, she was abused. She was from India. She didn't work. And the only way she needed money, the only way she could get out was through money. And they created this program that would allow her to train for this job and get a job so that she could be in a safe environment, right? So, but that all started just with a trip and a conversation. And then, that is her passion now, is, trying to help these people get jobs and make it a better spot for them to work in these factories. So they're not all the same, right? So
I mean, you probably hear countless of stories where someone said they had this and they went on and built. I mean, it's the public markets and the private markets. It's a countless where there's almost like my bell's dinging now as well. But there's that view out there. There's those, sort of find something, find the pain point, and then that validates it. It's easier to validate than if trying to make a better pizza or a better pizza.
Yeah. Well, every company is built off a problem, right? So they also need to clearly define what is that problem that you solved. And if they can't define it, it shouldn't be 20 things. It literally should just be, this is why, right? It should be simple to understand. English is a universal language, so are problems. So as soon as you, as an investor, understand the problem that they were solving, you start understanding their business before they even told you about it, right? So
okay, well, let's move on a bit. So there's you do me. There's that bell. That's a dating. Mel, is that the dating app that Laura was trying to work on, and that's the bell for it?
Jeffrey.
Be dating. I said Jeffrey. Jeffrey doesn't know about this. For those out there, for the two listeners out there, two watchers, Jeffrey's going to find out about this after. But okay, so Laura, your background is clearly technology, and Mel as well. But you also come across startups that are non-tech startups.
Yep.
So, for example, you mentioned, or I saw in the OPN, one of the presentation was the Cafe Canada, the coffee filter ideas. What do you say to founders that don't have a tech-centered or business?
I think everybody has to be on tech these days, right? So like if you're not in tech, you all have a digital shelf, right? So if you've got a product, you digitally have to be there, or it's going to be almost impossible to survive these days. With COVID, it's really just pushed forward the need for the digital shelf. Before, you could go to the grocery store and they would be able to buy your product. For that, we had a panel person talk in our CPG event, and she was saying that the pandemic really hurt her because she has like a protein bar, and people make their choices when they sit there and they look at the ingredients. So how do you take that and take it online so that people can start, how do they know the difference, right? So how do you take the online or the on-site shopping to online when it's such a competitive space? When you go to the store, there's 300 options, right? So It's a huge space. So how do you win that space digitally versus there? I would say, I don't know who isn't online, right? So it doesn't matter. You got to have an online presence, and you've got to be in tech somehow. Even some of the products, most products these days are both product and tech, right? If you've got a product, probably have an app. Not all the time, but like in a lot of cases, people are doing apps for their product to make them more fun or whatever it might be. So,
but you had the woman on that CPG, same one was, maybe it's the same lady you're talking about, the Sampler, the founder of Sampler, which was
I was talking about Susie. So Susie was the one that was talking about, yeah.
But the Sampler CEO, she was Chevrier, I can't remember her last name, but
Marie, yeah.
And it was incredible because that was the in-store testing the little samples or whatever, right? The Costco's or wherever. Right. And she went online with that, the digital sampler.
Right. Because even if you go to Costco today, guess what? They stand there and you look at the samples. People used to go there after Friday after work to get this dinner. And now you know, you just like look at it and you're like, well, that cheese looks great. I don't know what it tastes like.
You can't even
That is-
you can't. No, but that's it. You'd go. I mean, I used to go and then roll up, and as a student, I remember going back. Right, those were great. The free stamp cheese, meat, crackers. You and a little drink over there. Fine, you're done for. You know, you can go back and study. Right.
Exactly. But she took like the in-store experience and took it online. I mean, the pandemic is really, I feel, has pushed everything 10 years forward, no matter what generation, you know, even the older generation who used to insist on going into the bank was like, I can't be here for 2 hours anymore. I need to figure this out. So even they, you know, even my mother's like had Zoom coffees with the ladies, they wouldn't have known what that was without a pandemic, right? So it's really, most people now buy everything online. The older generation, they always wanted to go to stores, and now they, you know, they're more scared than other people because they're older, so they're more susceptible to getting it, and they're now buying everything online too. So it's really changed the whole game. You got to sell your product online. So I think everybody has to have a digital somewhere, whether it's a website, you're selling online, whether you're a service or product, you've got to be online and you've got to be marketing it online.
I think that's a valuable lesson. And I think the next question, and the last question really is the last question, because it's the tech stack. If you're non-tech or a tech founder, the tech stack is constantly evolving and changing. What do you say to any startup? Like, how do you manage through that? Like, it's just the world is constantly changing. The tech stack is constantly changing. What do you say to startups on that level, Laura? What's your lens on that one?
Well, I think you should always keep it as simple as you possibly can, right? So the very beginning, a lot of times you have to throw out the beginning part because it won't scale and grow with your business, right? But you need to create that in order to get investment dollars, because you have to show that you've validated your business in order to get that money. In regards to technology, it's ever changing, right? So like, you have to constantly be watching it, and you have to be constantly changing and growing with it. If you're not, you're going to be a dinosaur before you exit. So you gotta, it changes so fast. You know, as a developer or as a startup with their tech, you gotta watch the trends. And you know, with between AI and machine learning and everything that else has come out, and then even just like everybody's switching over to React, not everyone, but a lot of people are switching over to React Native because of the benefits with mobile and web and all that great stuff.
Right.
So a lot of people have seen that, recognized it, and they're switching, right? So
so startups, like, I guess, if are they married? Do you find them when they're married to a particular tech application?
It depends what it is, right? So if you're in fintech and you're worried about security, you're probably more likely to use a system like maybe .NET. But if you're not in like fintech or in sort of health tech, and you're not worried as much about security, HIPAA, that kind of stuff, you're probably going to use an open source because there's less fees, right? So
Mel, I know Laura mentioned she used to code in COBOL. Is that still are you, do you still get a demand for COBOL developers?
Not really. On our end here in the Philippines, maybe in some other corporations that are using AS400 servers, but most of them are switching to the cloud as well. So again, as what Laura said earlier, you have to watch and develop and progress with the trends of the market. If not, you'll be left behind. So although COBOL is still used in today's server, but majority of the corporations, majority of the enterprise have moved on to the more flexible infrastructure, which is the cloud. Although not everyone is open to using it, especially the ones the old school ones, but slowly all the majority of the enterprise applications are moving towards that route.
I think this Laura, that's going to be our next topic, and I don't know if Mel, as a producer, you should dictate this, but that data right there, the data from the COBOL and the mapping, Laura, I know we talked a little bit offline and data mapping. I think that'll be a great topic, and how to companies with legacy systems and then get into the new world. And Laura, was it GUI? You mentioned GUI the other day, and I had to Google this one. For the
'Cause I'm
GUI,
that old.
it's not some kind of gum or whatever you get on your shoe. It's actually graphical user interface. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
GUI. Okay. So I had to
Yeah.
Google that one, but thank you. Thank you for introducing me to GUI. And then we're not going there right now. But
This is back in 97, when everybody was switching over from text to what we have today. I guess it's like an old term now. So yeah.
I'd never heard of it, but I'm not a coder. But I had heard of COBOL. And the other one is Windows XP. I mean, how many companies today are still there? It was a couple of years ago they dropped it. Microsoft dropped Windows XP, but companies are still using it.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of companies like the banks really just I think COBOL still exists today. A lot of the banks have now switched off of it, but I still think that there's still COBOL programmers out there today. But yeah, it's technology's changed a lot. When I went to school, it was Visual Basic 1, and that was the very first course that you could create this visual interface, and look, how far it's come since. So it's
well, look and see, this is why we have Laura's lens, because you can look at it from a different angle. Literally, Laura, it's clear that you have a terrific lens on, I think, the startup landscape. And I think, Mel, if viewers or listeners want to learn more about Laura's work or Laura's lens on how do they find everyone? Companies
You
and
can
Laura and
Yeah, you can find Laura at OPN Ninja/team, and then also on supportersfund.com.
and Hard Boot, which is the company, the tech foundations of this whole network. Is that right?
Yep, yeah, hardbootinc.com as well.
Now, has that website been updated? We're still waiting for that update.
Yeah, it's just been updated. Yep.
Okay.
it's pushed live. That's exciting.
Not yet. The rebranding, not yet. But the existing website is still up.
All right. Well, we're excited. We can't wait. We'll aim to have that up next week.
Well, on
Yep.
behalf on Laura and Mel, Laura, this has been Laura's Lens on Startups. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks, Alan.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.